There we go. So my name is Andrew Romans. I'm going to quickly speak for a minute about how I got here, so a little bit of my own journey. And then I'll share some of the learnings of what I learned on the research for my new book, which is about corporate venture capital, which I think is relevant to emerging markets. And then I'll talk a little bit about what I think the future of venture capital is. So my story was this. I've always been an entrepreneur, had businesses throughout high school, but I had a venture-backed startup that raised a lot of money, so like north of $50 million. And what actually happens is, I was in the telecom space, sort of telecom internet space, and I speak at a lot of conferences, and the other entrepreneurs said, Andrew, you've raised money from those VCs, could you please introduce me to them? So without looking for deals, all these entrepreneurs were asking me to get connected to the VCs. And we had a really great business, so a lot of VCs wanted to invest in our company. And so I probably met hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of VCs along the way, going through 5 financings. The result was I had a ton of deal flow. And then VCs actually asked me if I could join the board of directors of some of their companies and help them raise venture capital funding, since I understood how do you go through the whole fundraising thing, and I was fairly technical on the telecom side. So I did that for about 10 years, where I made some decent money, and then I said, I feel bad taking these good deals and just giving them to these VCs. I mean, some of them are good, but they're not all great, and just giving them my best deal, why should I do that? Why don't I, meet some people, get money into my fund, and then fund these companies myself? So I really wanted, very badly, like an entrepreneur, to have my own VC fund. And I was fortunate enough to partner up with my best friend. So this slide shows San Francisco on the left, and New York on the right. It kind of blends together. I run our San Francisco Silicon Valley office. Joshua Siegel runs our office in New York City. So real fast on us, we are an early stage. By the way, I made a bunch of slides for you guys, but I'm not going to drag you and torture you through them. I'll put them on SlideShare. So the last slide shows you where you can download it if you're interested. So real fast on Rubicon, or I'll say this, all right? So Ozan mentioned it. And by the way, Ozan, thank you for bringing me here. And Barack, it's amazing how hard that guy works. And this is an insane, amazing setup. So I love this whole Startup Istanbul thing. So I wrote a book a couple years ago where I interviewed about 50 different VCs and CEOs, and I said, tell me a story where you learned something. And if it's good enough, I'll put it in the book. And so that's what the first book is about. I hate the title. McGraw-Hill put that title up. When it was translated into Chinese, they called it Masters of Venture Capital. I thought that was a way cooler title. So my new book, working off the Chinese, I called it Masters of Corporate Venture Capital. What actually happened on this book was that a large Chinese corporate in the telecom sector that I know very well, that I've done some deals with, asked me, could I advise them on how to set up their CVC, their corporate venture capital group. So that means Intel Capital, Qualcomm, Salesforce Ventures. This is where the corporation has maybe 50 billion of revenue a year, and they start investing into startups, and sometimes they invest into VC funds as well. And so with this company from China, I said, look, here's what I'll do for you. I will interview the top 20 or 30 CVCs, corporate venture capital groups, like Intel, like Qualcomm, like Salesforce, and I'll ask them, how do you do it? Does the CFO have to sign a piece of paper? Is there an investment committee? How do the numbers work? How do you compensate people? Tell me everything. And then I'll take that, and I'll give it to you guys in China as a private report and give you my own advice of what I think you should do after looking at what the other guys do. And then I thought, this could be book number 2. Actually, my first book got too long, and I cut the whole CVC section, so I was kind of happy to give it that attention. What I learned, I thought that I could just sit down and write that book on one rainy Sunday afternoon because I had so much interaction with CVCs. Lucent put $27 million into my company, so I had a CVC master as well as regular financial VCs. But I actually learned a lot. I learned a ton, and I would take these meetings with the head of CVC, who's often the head of M&A as well, and they would roll up into these meetings and like vomit up a whole bunch of information on me. Like they were prepared. They knew about the first book, they wanted to be in the second book, and I actually learned a lot. I think it's relevant to emerging markets and perhaps Turkey. I've never been here before, so I don't know enough to say anything intelligent really about Turkey, other than I see a ton of people interested in startups here, which is pretty cool. But I think that a lot of these emerging markets do not have the same sort of evolved ecosystems that we have in the Silicon Valley or New York or London, or even Stockholm or Paris and Berlin, and that corporations can fill in some of this gap. So if there's corporates here, I'd love to talk to you about how you can get involved in startup innovation via venture capital. But in the Valley, for example, some of the most acquisitive companies, acquisitive means what company buys startups. If you have an internet startup, statistically, mathematically, Google is going to buy you. If not, if you're enterprise software, it's probably Oracle. And then there's VMware and just a ton of other companies, but they're mostly around the Silicon Valley. Every time a startup gets acquired, if there's 10 employees or 2,000 employees, they all of a sudden get money in their pocket. So overnight, it's like a firework. It goes, and all these people that were working at that startup have money in their pocket, and they're hanging out in the valley. Their spouse probably loves the weather. They learn how to surf or whatever and go hiking, and so they're going to stay there. And so the result is that these people personally want to fund with their own money as angel investors other startups that are bursting out of these companies. So Benioff worked for Tom Siebel, got acquired by Oracle, and then he went and started Salesforce. And now he's a monster. He's funding like tons of stuff, very different than most CVCs. But one cannot expect that we're going to have the same thing here, where there's this every day someone's getting acquired, and every day there's some young person drinking a lot in San Francisco saying, I love you, man, I'm going to fund your company. You don't have that over here, I think, as much as we do over there. So I think the corporations could potentially play a good role to move things forward in our lifetime. So I don't want to die waiting for stuff to happen. I want it to happen when I'm still alive. So I think the key thing, every time I met a corporate, when I was doing this research for that Chinese company in this book, I said, why do you do it anyway? Like, what are your top reasons why you invest in venture capital funds and directly into companies? And there's a lot of different reasons. There's some offense, there's some defense, but in general, in the ancient times of like the 1980s, you needed to have a huge R&D budget to make something innovative. So you have IBM, Hewlett-Packard, they've got just multi-billion-dollar budgets where they're paying engineers to make something innovative. I think today, unless you live in Japan, most people don't really want to work. The really talented person graduating from the university wants to be like Zuckerberg, Steve Jobs, Bill Gates. They don't necessarily want to work at the big R&D lab and spend 40 years just working there. So the big corporations need to reach outside of their company and grab startup innovation and pull that innovation inside. If you are a big corporation and you have a corporate development group, corporate development means M&A. These are the guys that work at the big balance sheet company and they buy startups. Or they buy whatever, they're merging, M&A. The best way to drive M&A, in my opinion, is to have a strong corporate venture capital unit. And to me, if you show up from China or Turkey and you try to arrive in the Silicon Valley hoping to acquire innovation and pull it inside your company, I think the smartest thing you can do is buy your way into the game. It's like bribing the right Russians, not the wrong ones, And what that means, it's clean. You put money into like 40 different VC funds. I think Barack should have a fund. My God, I mean, look at the funnel of deals the guy's looking at. People here should put money in that guy's fund, and then they will have access to all that innovation. And if you're a corporate, and I'm making this up, let's say, Barack raises a huge fund and you guys invest in it, he'll understand what those startups are doing, he'll understand the different business units of your large corporation, and he can start to make partnerships. So there's kind of three sides to this. There's what's in it for the corporate, what's in it for the startup, and there's what's in it for a guy like me, who's a financial VC, with investors that want to make money. We want to make money. That's what we are. The startup probably wants to grow fast, potentially go international. And the corporate wants to make sure that they don't become Blockbuster getting killed by Netflix. So that's a defense. And they probably want to, a lot of corporations, in my view, are number one in a declining market. They have to do something to diversify their products and services, and they should ultimately be either understanding what's going on out there, from artificial intelligence to whatever buzzword you want, and that should help drive strategy inside of the corporate. And if you use CVC together with M&A, you can start to acquire businesses that will create multi-billion-dollar reoccurring revenue streams, and you'll diversify from your number one position in a declining market into a diverse set of products and services. So I think that if we're waiting for the startup ecosystem to evolve so that it's like that firework where all these employees get acquired and start funding everybody, it could be cool if corporations start putting money into VC funds. If they try to set up their own VC fund, like I said to the Chinese guys, if you show up in Silicon Valley and you bring actual PRC Chinese people and say, we've got suitcases full of money, you're probably not going to get into the best deal. Like Y Combinator would probably refer their best portfolio company to Sequoia or Kleiner Perkins, or maybe me, rather than some large corporation coming in from China. So if you make their list of what were your objectives anyway, why are you doing this? If you've got a $56 billion revenue and you put 10% of that, $5.6 billion, into next year's R&D budget, what are you trying to achieve? And I think that if they send their own guys directly, it's going to be tough to get into the best Y Combinator deal. Whereas if they invest into a fund like me, I'll make one example. Somebody here has probably got a mobile app. Let's say that you got a mobile payment app. And let's say that I raised $25 million from Huawei in China. Huawei shipped 100 million smartphones, like iPhones, in 2015. This year, they're going to ship 250 million. That gives us a population of 350 million phones that we could put like a wireless service book and push your app onto 350 million phones. So someone here has got a mobile app that I would like to stick on the 350 million Huawei smartphones. That's going to juice your revenue. So I think the future of VC, to me, is add value. Every VC will say that, but typically, you've got the limited partners are the people that put the money into the VC fund, and you get the general partners are the guys like me that make the investments into startups, and then you get the portfolio companies, okay? So that's the graph, 1, 2, 3. Usually these LPs that conventionally back the asset class are like pension funds, insurance companies. They're writing minimum check of like $25 million. They don't want to have any interaction with that portfolio of startups. They just want to put money to work in the fund. And so the general partners are forced to hire people to deliver value to the startups, not to mention go through that funnel of looking at 10,000 deals, take meetings, do due diligence, vet them, complete investments in a competitive environment, and then deliver value to the company post-investment. What happened with us was that we raised money from people that we knew. So early employees of Google, Twitter, Facebook, VMware, all these places, they put their own money into our fund, and so it's their money that we're investing. And so for us, I call it the collective brain, that we source deals as a group. So all these people send deals, and then I try to be like, I'm not an expert in everything, but I know an expert for almost everything, so I try to traffic it to the right person. And I always introduce the entrepreneur to, like, if I like an entrepreneur, even if I don't invest, I'll introduce them to 2 or 3 people just to do them a favor. And then they'll tell their friends that I hooked them up with like 3 good introductions. And then good karma comes back to us, and then more deal flow comes to us, because they know even if we don't get funded, Rubicon will connect you to some cool people. But when I'm connecting them to it, it's a 2-sided coin. On one hand, we're doing due diligence, and we're trying to figure out, is this the right AI company to invest in? But on the other hand, we're seducing the CEO to make them want us. If you're a really hot company, there's a lot of VCs competing to get into that deal. So we need to seduce the entrepreneur to be willing to take our money. And that's where, again, I would just keep it simple and say, VC must add value. I remember, I won't say his name, but there's a big VC from Sand Hill Road, Silicon Valley, and I sat down with him and said, how many board of directors are you on? And he said 19. And if you think about that, there's going to be at least 4, if not 8 board meetings a year. He's on 19 boards. That's a lot of meetings to go to be prepared for, to be present in the meeting, and to do your action items and follow up afterwards. I then said to him, you know what, man, I don't believe you. I think you're on 40 boards. And he almost spit up his coffee and he goes, you're right. I'm on 39. I'm on 39 boards, and I'm spending most of my time trying to get off the board. So these guys are hot. They put the money in. Everybody wants him on the board because he's a big name. And as soon as he's on the board, he's just trying to get off and get someone else to fill in his role. With us, I think that doesn't scale. One person who's doing all the work by themselves just does not make sense to me. And I had VCs on my board, and they were like taking phone calls in the middle of the meetings. It was hard to get them to pay attention to like the problems we were facing. So my view is we raise money from a mix of angel investors, so individual high net worth individuals, family offices are like super rich people that now have a staff helping them deal with their investments, corporations, and some passive LPs, some passive institutional investors, mostly from Japan. So we're okay to take a passive investor who wants no interaction with our portfolio companies. But what gets me excited is I don't even worry how big the check is. If somebody invests in our fund and he's a cool person or she's a cool woman, it's one more node in the network. So I can say to a startup, hey, we've got a family office from Turkey, and they can do distribution for you in 20 Muslim markets, and the other guys in Sand Hill Road are telling you to focus on San Francisco, New York, and London. By the time you get to London, you got 1 million copycats in Beijing. It's already too late. With us, the fantasy would be, you know what? I just got off the phone with one of our LPs from Turkey, and they've got a business unit that's ready to be your distribution partner in these 20, Muslim markets. And we're going to juice sales, and we're going to go at it, and we're going to hit it hard. So that's part of what I think is the future of VC is add value or go away. Cash is not enough. Like, I heard on an earlier panel, like, what advice would you give an entrepreneur? Like, I think the most important decision for an entrepreneur is who is your co-founder. That's like who you're getting married to. That's probably important as well in life, right? Because it's all about the team. And then after that first decision of who are the co-founders, it's get the network of people around that company. I had dinner 2 nights ago with an entrepreneur here who has a lot of money, and so he doesn't need our cash, but I think we could help them. And I think it's important for these entrepreneurs to say, what am I missing? Like the old TV show Mission Impossible, I don't know if anyone remembers that. In the beginning of the show, it would always start that the guy whips out these photos. He looks at these like headshots. The woman who can speak German or whatever, like he goes through all these photos, and he picks the right people to take off that impossible mission. That's kind of like what it is at a startup. Who do you need to open the door? What door do you need to open? And let's go find that person and provision them into your company, if not as an employee, as an advisor, or an investor, or just get connected. So I guess I'll stop there. Do we do questions? No? All right, well, I'll be hanging around. I fly home tomorrow, and thank you for having me, and wow, Istanbul, beautiful city. Oh, if you want to download the slides, let me just power to the end of this. It's on SlideShare. You could probably just look me up on SlideShare. Yeah, there you go. It's just slideshare.net, Andrew Romans, and you can pull down that information if you find it interesting.
Right. Startups are used to me pushing them off stage, and it's really hard for me to do it to Andrew. But thanks so much, man. Thanks so much for coming.
Thanks for having me, man.
Thanks for the book as well. I'm very happy to be a part of it.